Hey class, Mr. Helson here for another space science lesson. This is lesson 6. How far away are they? So we're going to look at the different heights and different objects and just how far away can we get on planet Earth. So this is lesson 6. If you haven't done the previous lessons, go ahead and pause this lesson now and go do those older lessons. Even if you're turning them in late, it's better to do those before you begin this. Because if you start with these newer lessons, then some of the content might not make as much sense. Um, Once again, as we're going along in the video, you should open the document I provided for you. How far away are they? Space lesson 6, with the questions that you can answer as you go along with the video, and pause as you go and answer these questions. I now am able to share with you your own copy for everyone. So when you open this up, you will have a copy. It won't be a shared copy for everyone. You don't have to copy and paste. You use this copy and you need to attach it when you complete the assignment. I'm still getting some people turning in and there's nothing attached there. There's nothing for me to grade. And if you do that, I, I don't have anything to look at. So you got to make sure you click that attach button and you select the document that you want to turn in from the drive. In this case, it'll be this one, how far away there. And if you're confused on that, there are directions. You just got to look for them in the Google Classroom stream. If you look down, there are directions on attaching a document. All right, let's begin. So like I said before, we're going to look at some objects, and we're looking at distance and scale, and we're going to be using the metric system. You might remember in the past using meter sticks and measuring all around the classroom in the metric system for measuring for length and width and distance. So how far away are they? So as we go, keep in mind this is the length of a 1 meter. There's 100 centimeters in 1 meter. There's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. It's about this length. We got our grumpy looking science teacher, math teacher there holding a meter stick. It's just about your arm's length if you stretched out your arms. Also keep in mind that when we are talking about very far distances, we start using kilometers, and a kilometer is 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters in a kilometer. In fact, kilo, if you see kilometer, kilometer, kilo means 1,000. So if you have 5 kilometers, times that by 1,000, you have 5,000 meters. And in space science, we even start using bigger distances than kilometers. We start getting in astronomical units. But that's another story for another lesson. So for this first part, I want you to think of the tallest thing you see around you. And I mean really tall, not just your mom or dad, they're tall, or a sibling. No. Think taller than that. You might have to look out a window or even go outside for a little bit, just making sure you're being safe and away from people. But you can go outside and look around. What are some tall things around you? And take a note with those. You can share those on the document or just think about them as we go. So go ahead and pause the video right now and come back once you've looked around at some tall things. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you have a few tall items in mind. Maybe you went outside and you looked out and you're like, oh, yeah, my house, or apartment building or something is pretty tall. And well, maybe you looked around some more and go, okay, well, there's some things taller than that. And you looked out and you saw these little magical green things poking out called trees. And you're like, well, trees can be really tall as well. So maybe you had a few other items. You're welcome to share those. Maybe you saw a telephone pole. They can be pretty tall as well. But buildings and trees right away should be some of the tallest things around you. This is not my house, by the way, but just a random picture of a house I found. Now, the tallest tree belongs to Hyperion. Hyperion is the tallest tree in the world, and it's not in Washington, although this kind of looks like Washington, but it's south of us in California. It is a California coastal redwood, and it's in the protected national forest. It is tall. It is 115.7 meters tall. And if you're thinking about math, you'd probably just round that up to 116, but we're going to be a little exact today. Look how it towers over these other trees. Now just imagine you standing by an average sized tree and then standing by this. Now keep in mind this isn't called the biggest tree because it's tall and skinny compared to the sequoia tree, which is a lot thicker. It's a big guy, and that's General Sherman. If you remember from the video earlier in the year where we had looked at General Sherman and how it's just full of air makes up most of the mass of a tree. Air, a little bit of water, which is pretty wild to think about. So Hyperion is the tallest tree at 115.7 meters. Now you might be thinking, well, is there anything taller than a tree? Some buildings could be taller than this tree. Some are shorter. So you might think of like, well, my house definitely isn't that tall. Or I don't think any building in Cedar Woolley is that tall, or even Skagit County. But we could think about some skyscrapers, such as like the Empire State Building or some of the buildings in Seattle, Space Needle. But so what is the tallest building in the world, the tallest skyscraper? Where does that come in comparison when we're thinking about how far away something is? Well, the tallest building is called the Burj Khalifa. The Burj Khalifa, and that is 828 meters tall. Now, I want you to think about the Hyperion, the tree, which was 116 meters. So that's almost 8 of those tall trees up. Maybe about 7.5, 8 of those all the way up. This is huge. The Burj Khalifa is in Dubai, a city in the Middle East, and it is huge. If you ever, I think they're one of the Mission Impossible movies. There's an action scene where Tom Cruise climbs up this thing. It is huge. That's the tallest building right now. Who knows? Maybe there'll be another taller building than that. In fact, look how it just makes these other skyscrapers look so small in comparison. But you went, I know what's taller. Mountains. Yeah, there's mountains that are taller than that. And you think about a mountain that you might even see depending on your view from your house or where you can go outside and look. But this is Mount Baker, our closest tall mountain. It's not the tallest mountain in Washington. That's Mount Rainier, a little bit south of us. It's easier to see once you start heading down towards Seattle. But Mount Baker is fairly large mountain next to us, but there's a lot of other mountains that are even taller. And Mount Baker is 3,286 meters, or about 3 kilometers. But what about some of these taller mountains? Maybe you know what the tallest mountain is in the world. And the tallest mountain is Mount Everest. Mount Everest is in the Himalayan mountains, right in between Nepal and India in Asia. So Mount Everest is the tallest point on Earth. So that's the highest anyone can go to. And mountain climbers, and when you see pictures or video of mountain climbers, they usually have to have oxygen masks on and other gear because it's, of course, so obviously cold up there, but there's very little oxygen. The air is very thin because of how far they are up in the atmosphere. So how tall is Mount Rainier? Well, Mount Rainier, oh my goodness, I messed up. Mount Everest. I hope I wasn't saying Mount Rainier the whole time. Mount Everest. Mount Everest is 8,848 meters. So if we go back to Mount Baker, that's 3,286 meters. And Mount Everest is 8,848 meters. So that's almost 5,000 meters taller than Mount Baker's Mount Everest. Sorry if you guys were confused and I said Mount Rainier. So here's a comparison chart with some of the other taller mountains and just how tall Mount Everest is. It's the highest point on our planet. The highest point. This is the highest you can physically get before you have to get on an airplane. So then we have a couple different mountains here. Mount McKinley, which is in Alaska, is 6,000. So again, Mount McKinley is about twice as tall as Mount Baker. So what if, like I said, if we want to get higher than on top of Mount Everest, well, you got to get on a plane, right? So jetliners, like your common commercial airliner, flies at about 10 kilometers up in the sky, or 10,000 meters. 10 kilometers up there. And, well, you might be wondering, well, can birds fly that far? Well, some actually can. The Ruppel's vulture uh, can fly at about the same height, around 10,000 meters, or 10 kilometers up in the sky. So birds can still fly that high, which is pretty crazy to think about. If we want to keep going further, higher and higher, well, we have the highest skydive, which was basically in space. He was still technically kind of in the atmosphere. This was actually a record that was broken pretty recently, by Felix Baumgartner, and he was 39,000 meters up in the sky. He rode like a special hot air balloon, like a special weather balloon, in this little capsule here, and jumped out. You see him in his protective equipment spacesuit. He had to have oxygen. He had to make sure he was protected, and basically skydiving from space, essentially, and had his parachute pack and everything. And in this lesson, I have a link to that video there, and it's pretty cool to watch. Pretty crazy that he was able to safely pull that off, because it isn't just as easy as jumping off something and pulling the parachute. He had to physically train on how he was going to fall, because, well, yeah, you could not come out of that alive if you didn't do it right, because of how fast he was falling. So check out that video. I'll have a link in the assignment for that. If we go up further, we're at the edge of the atmosphere. So this is right, there isn't just like a line that we draw when all of a sudden you're in space, right? The atmosphere's layers get thinner and thinner and more distinct, but right around 120 kilometers, or 120,000 meters up, is kind of the end of the Earth's atmosphere, when we're pretty much in space. And in space, do we have any place to go? Well, if you're an astronaut, you get to go to the International Space Station. So the International Space Station is in space, floating right above the Earth's atmosphere at 408,000 meters, or 408 kilometers up in space. And you can see the Earth in a distance there, and just how far they are away. Now, that's just getting to the nearest place where people go into space. Now, just think about how far the moon is. Think about how far the sun is, and then think about how far those stars that we see in the distance are. So there's just so much more space out there in the scale of things. So this is the last object today. As we go into space, we'll stop at the International Space Station. So that's it for today. Fill out those questions in there, filling out the different distances of objects, and let me know if anything comes up. I'll do my best to help you out. All right, guys, until next time, see you later.